Okay, how to create systems that don't confuse your team. This is super, super important because when building any kind of system, if you won't use it for years, you have wasted your time building it. So right now I'm in the middle of creating a project management system for a client that has over 30 members of staff in different realms and 10 people on the operations team who are actively involved in the day to day, making sure that everybody is getting what they need to be getting. It's a massive, massive coaching program. And I created in about 25 minutes the initial mock up of an Airtable base, which created more clarity than anything that the client had already bought from other services. So it's very, very simple. It's literally just a number of tables for all of the things that would need to be put in place. Everything that's in all caps is everything that's in all caps will link to other things, and everything that's a Kanban is organized such that the individuals who need to use it know exactly where to look. And again, this is a mock-up, so like there's a number of people who these two trackers need to be duplicated for. But inside of Airtable, you can just make sections and make Kanbans of those sections, which are based on filters, and then have people not touch the filters, so that they only see the things that they need to see. And if anything is missing, then it's because they haven't put it there, or it's because some or it's for, or you know what the reason is as to why things are broken, or you can just accurately pinpoint and find things. So why is this the case? I actually had a little thing like, why was something that was so, easy to implement, that was done very tacitly by me, something that could have created such a response from the individual? Well, the first thing is the system is primarily aligned with how the team actually uses things, as opposed to abstractions based on what automates the most stuff. So I have a very clear understanding of how things are operated inside of this coaching program, and I have a very clear understanding of what needs to be done. And I also know how people are actively using things, not how they're meant to use things, but how they're actively using things. This means that the stickiness of the system is way higher, because if you can do things that align with what people are already doing, but just do it in a different place, then there's very minimal difference between what they were doing before and what they're doing now. And if what they were doing before was ineffective or sloppy or inefficient, then putting it into its own space so that they can use the things that are, right in front of them, is something that's always going to be more effective, and it's going to be effective for a very long time. The operations team in and of itself with this system is fully aligned because each person has a central hub where they can view everything that they need to view at a glance. And number two, the system is anchored by solutions to problems that the CEO has, and those problems are the guiding light for everything else that gets made. So for example, the CEO, and this is from his words, wants a centralized, unorganized, easily understood system that can work across the entire organization. Centralized and organized is the important part, because things are in like 8 different places. They're using like 8 or 9 different softwares, all of which are on paid plans. If they can get everything into one centralized system, not only can they make it so that things are easier to find, but they also make it so that they can just delete 7 subscriptions. So this ends up becoming a financial benefit in and of itself as well. Number two, they don't want to see things that are confusing. A lot of the times inside of different Airtables, inside of different Trello boards, there's a bunch of stuff that is being used in order to fuel automations or operate other things. If they are within sight, it just confuses you, because if you're in the thing and you're not doing any automations, you're just working on the thing that needs to be worked on or moving cards from left to right. If you can see everything, including things that should be hidden, then you're going to get confused because there's just too much cognitive load around the thing that needs to be done. And three, wants things to be easily updated on a regular basis, preferably daily. The better these 3 problems are solved, the easier it is for a system to get incorporated into this specific business and businesses in general. So even with a top-down approach, because the rest of the team who are experiencing the same grievances with how they work are basically, working in the way that they're working, even though this is like a top-down approach from the CEO, they'll also be relieved with the new setup. Even the individuals who are, like the dissenting voices, they don't want things to change because they found a way to make a crappy system work for themselves. If you bring them towards a system that works in alignment with the way that things are most effective, then those people who have this status quo bias, who could be dissenting voices, will come to terms with the change more comfortably than otherwise. The underlying idea behind those two whys is this: the simpler the system looks, the more likely it will be adopted for a long time. So what do you need to take into account in order to actually do this? How should you, think about building a new system for a particular department? So there's two things that come to mind, and both of these things will be explained. The first is second order thought, and the second is Occam's razor. So let me explain second order thought real quickly. Second order thought is, call it like chess-like thinking. You need to think about the consequence of everything that you build and traverse the decision trees to get to the solution that you need. So it's a mental model that can be described in one sentence. If this happens, what can happen next? So in the same way that you'd be playing chess and all of the pieces on the table are, strewn across the place, and you have a castle who's in, G3, and you want to move it to F3, for example. What happens when you move it? What can they do? What do they now need to think about? What do they now need to put into place, implement, etc.? Those things and that idea in and of itself, if you extrapolate that idea as a whole and you apply it to project management and setting up systems for whatever situation that you need, then you can engineer things towards a specific purpose and a specific goal, and what you end up engineering ends up benefiting everybody just globally. It's chess-like thinking, just looking 3 to 4 steps ahead of where you're at. And you do that by seeing the landscape from above and committing to actions that have long-term benefits. So from a project management system perspective, the easiest way to do this is to put all of the information in one place. So for example, if you're creating a system in Airtable like the one above, you want to create a system that aligns with how people are genuinely going to work. And usually, if we're going to use like a very broad idea as to what that would be, you would have one, base or folder, if it's in like Notion or ClickUp, which is the department in and of itself. And underneath that, you have all of the systems or all of the places where all of the systems will be held. So for example, you have a table called content, a table called ads, and if this is Notion, then it's a database called content, it's a database called ads, a database called cold email. And there's usually one type of global table which links to everything so that everything speaks to each other, and all of the different sections and views can be created. Because for example, if we remove clients and we change this to staff, then you could have a cold email operations table. Let's say for example, this is just a marketing agency that just gets leads for different businesses, and they do cold email, ads, and content. You would have a table for cold email, a table for ads, and a table for content. And then you would change, instead of this being clients, it would be staff. And this would link to each individual base or each individual table. And those individual tables would have something called, assignees, for example. And it would just be a cross linkage to this one up here. Simple things like that. Those are kind of like the underpinnings of the systems that you would need. And with this system, you can actually organize it and engineer it so that everything that would be needed for this department as a whole is put in one place. So for example, if you're doing anything related to operations stuff should be in the operations folder, ad copy and creative stuff should be in the ad campaigns folder, etc., etc., etc. And one base covers the whole department. So you need to really set it up so that there are very few things that will ever need changing. All of the data can be found in one place, and all of the updates occur where they're meant to occur. So anything that changes happens in one particular place, and if that needs to be reflected somewhere else, an automation does that outside of the view of the people who are working inside of the system. So this can still cause a mess though. So how do we further reduce the chances of errors happening? Well, in comes Occam's razor. So Occam's razor basically states that you need to create solutions with the smallest possible set of elements. It's the whole idea that if you have 2 explanations for a particular occurrence or a particular thing that happened, it's more than likely that the situation occurred based on the explanation that has the smallest number of variants or variables. We will always take the path of least resistance when faced with a challenge. If everything is everywhere, and this is just the human condition, cognitive load increases. When you're having to look for something and it's not in the place it needs to be, you need to go and find it. You've now added another step to someone's process. You've now added another step to someone's day. If they're on a tight schedule or they need to get something done quickly, that just increases the amount that they need to think about, which just increases cognitive load. More cognitive load means more confusion, and confusion causes frustration. If someone is annoyed, they will pin the annoyance on the system first and foremost. They'll often complain that, oh, this is absolute nonsense. I can't believe it's taking me so long to find this thing. This is crap, this, that, and the other. And they'll just start throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So to reduce the chances of the system being blamed for anything that happens, simplifying things will make things easier to manage, which will stop that from happening. The simpler the better, always. And there are a couple of ways to think about simplifying the systems that you would make for individual businesses or for yourself. And the first thing is to use minimal software, or to use the minimum number of softwares. Consolidation first and foremost. You should actively limit how many different places information can be held. So as an example, for coaching programs, you can get by with Google Sheets, Typeform, a community SaaS like School, Slack, or Circle, and Airtable. Airtable covers project management and has everything else in it. Google Sheets and Typeform basically have any kind of like surveys or response forms or whatever it may be. And School, Slack, Circle, these are the places where things just happen. Lead generation agencies can get by with just Google Sheets, Airtable, and Smart Lead, because a Google Sheet will manage everything. Obviously, we're leaving out lead databases and other things that need to be used. Usually with lead generation agencies, there's probably like 10, 15 different data sources, so we're not going to include that. But they will all go into a Google Sheet. The Google Sheets for all of the individual campaigns can be managed in Airtable, and they can also be sent and acted on by linking Airtable with a cold email software, in this example, like Smart Lead. Landing page agencies themselves can also get by with Google Docs, Airtable, Framer, and Figma. So, Google Docs for the copy that goes on the landing page, Airtable to manage everything, Framer to develop the page, and Figma to design the page. Content management companies can also get by with Notion, Airtable, and, like a community manager or a poster like Metrical, Contentful, Hootsuite, Hypefury, Taplio, all of these other examples, right? Local business marketing agencies can get by with Airtable, High Level, and Facebook. High Level is a CRM. All of the stuff that comes from the ads from Facebook can be zapped into High Level, and any management for the projects can be done in Airtable as well. SaaS teams as well can get by with Airtable, Linear, a back-end database, a front-end system, and Visual Code Editor. You get the point. Minimal software. You don't need to add extra stuff. You don't need to add Retool if you're already using it for Airtable. You don't need to add, 4 or 5 different back-end databases. Obviously, this is just depending on the size of the database and what you want to do with the thing, but you get my point. So that's the first thing. Use minimal software. The second thing is simple rules. Simple rules equals concrete guidance that isn't overly prescriptive. And if you want an example of where this comes from, get this book. This book is an absolute lifesaver. It will describe a lot of things when it comes to dealing with complexity, and it can be applied very, very broadly across business and in general across life. I've read this book when in like 2015, way before I started doing business. They're shortcut strategies that save time and effort by focusing attention and simplifying the way you process information. It allows you to act without having to stop and rethink every single decision. And they're also ubiquitous in nature. So, for example, birds have simple rules hard-coded into their DNA based on how to flock together when they fly. And it's very, very simple. For this to happen, 3 things are hard-coded into their DNA. 1, don't get close to another bird. 2, don't get too far away from another bird or from the center of the flock. And if you drift out, head back into the flock. 3, fly in a parallel direction. Head in the same way as your neighbors. So to provide a real life example, the easiest rule to give to a team that is going to be in a project management system, for example, would be something like, if it's a Kanban, use it. If it's not, don't touch it. So in the same way in the example above, where I explained, Airtable base, a bunch of tables, and then a couple of views, just those Kanban views. If it's not a Kanban view, don't touch it. Simple as, because that's where all of the work that is going to be done needs to be done. You also want to selectively hide things to reduce errors and complexity, and other simple rules that you can implement in order to do this, whether that be for the person creating the system itself or for the top level staff who's managing everything, who would have like full access, includes the following things: like if it operates the system and should not be touched, hide it. You need to give selective access, i.e. editors for people who are, inside of Airtable bases, so that they don't fiddle around with the tables and mess with formulas and things like that. Because, creators can do that and editors can't. Or commenters instead of editors. If, for example, you're sending something for review or approval to a client and you want them to give their 2 cents, you don't want them fiddling around in your system. You just want them commenting on things that you've highlighted in your system. And 3, if it pertains to an automation, indicate this or hide it. Preferably hide it. In fact, almost always hide it. But if you need to indicate that this is something that powers an automation, then that needs to be indicated somewhere. So, just to summarize, if you want to build something that doesn't confuse the team and can be used for years with no complaints, then A, put all the information in one place. B, simplicity wins. C, use minimal software. Try and get below 2 different apps. If you can get to 2 to 5 is kind of manageable. Preferably if it's for one particular thing or one whole team uses something. If you can get that whole team to work on one thing, then perfect. If other teams use other things, but they don't need to use everything else, then that also works. And 4, create simple rules when giving instructions on how to operate. You don't need to be able to build crazy stuff in order to have an effect. That is absolutely unnecessary for most people, especially at certain stages and certain sizes. Individual automations are mostly nice to have, but the system in and of itself, plus the automations and the UI that everybody else is going to work from, makes the system a need to have. So if you're building something that needs to be used across a multitude of individuals, the simpler it is, the easier it is to adopt, the stickier it becomes, and the easier it is to change when processes are updated. So if you're trying to consolidate and centralize a bunch of unorganized resources, links, and SOPs across multiple different platforms, you keep getting asked where things are by experienced team members because things just keep on getting lost, or you feel like you want to rip out your current project management system and start again, then there'll be a link in description or, somewhere where I'll be able to provide some recommendations.